Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and I thought I would do a new video on Svelte. Okay, so over the last few months I've done new videos on React and new videos on Vue, so I thought I'd also revisit Svelte and go a little deeper into it. Okay, so this first video we're going to talk about setting up Svelte, what is Svelte, and some of just the basics of Svelte. Okay, so first off, what is Svelte? Svelte is a front-end framework in the same way that React is a front-end framework, Angular is a front-end framework, and Vue is a front-end framework. The big difference is the syntax is real easy to learn. Why it's real easy to learn is because it goes through a compile step. So it doesn't have to be like perfect JavaScript because the compiler can just break down what's inside the files and figure it all out. So they can make a simpler syntax and use things like what you would see in like templating languages and whatnot. So it takes what it finds in your files, compiles it into just standard JavaScript, which has a secondary benefit where since your code is compiled down to basic JavaScript, what you ship out, what users have to download doesn't have to include this framework, okay? Because when you go to a website that uses React, you're also downloading the React framework along with everything else. You're downloading the Vue framework along with anything else. You're downloading the Angular framework along with everything else. So it makes the bundle size a bit bigger. Okay, not so much that they're still fast frameworks, but with Svelte, there's no additional, just what your code does. So the end result ends up being sort of really small and super fast. Okay, so that's sort of the benefit, the promise of Svelte. Okay, and it uses it just basically takes your code and turns it to normal JavaScript. So how do we create a project? There's a couple different ways to do it. Okay, so if you go to Svelte's website, which is svelte.dev, they generally use this tool called Degit. Now Degit is a cool tool that allows you to clone a Git repository, and it does it in a cool way where basically what it does, instead of cloning the repository, it's downloading the tarball and expanding the tarball. I have a tool that I've created that kind of does something similar, except it actually clones the repository. The difference is when you clone the repository, the Git repository is still there. So I have two versions of my tool, which is what we're going to use today. So we're going to open up Terminal. So somewhere in your VS Code, open up to a blank folder. So I'm using Visual Studio Code as my IDE. I'm assuming you know JavaScript. Okay, so if you don't know JavaScript, go back and learn JavaScript first. And if you want to use, whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you can use my main tool, which is npx merced spinup. That's the name of the tool. Okay, and then you're going to download the Svelte template, and then you just put the name of your folder. Okay, that'll work whether you're on Windows, Linux, or Mac. Now I have one that's a little bit more robust, but it's built for Bash, so it definitely will work on Mac or Windows. It may not work on, will definitely work on Mac or Linux. It may not work on Windows. Maybe if you're Node Bash, I haven't tested it out. Okay, and that's npx node basher. So node basher is just this tool that I'm making where I'm going to have all these sort of utility scripts that unabashedly use Bash. Okay, Bash is the default terminal in Mac and Linux systems because they're both Unix based. So npx node basher, we're going to spin up, that's the script we're using, which is the spin up template. Same thing that Merced spinup uses with a few extra commands. So instead of just cloning the Git template, it'll actually clone it and remove the Git remote and install everything from npm for you. So it's a little bit more robust. You don't have extra steps you have to do. So I'm going to use that because I can. So npx node basher spin up, the name of the template, which is Svelte. I have a whole bunch of other templates. So npx node basher spin up Svelte, and we're just going to call this project 1. Cool. And there it is. There's my project 1 folder. You can see it just finished. So I got my little uncompleted prompt there. Okay. So when you first open up your Svelte project, you're going to have a rollup.config. So you may be used to usually seeing a Webpack. Rollup is another type of bundler. Rollup, the people who made Rollup are the same people who made Svelte. Okay. And they generally make really cool, innovative tools. Rollup was innovative. Svelte is innovative. it's all really cool. Here's like the Svelte README that tells you all like the Svelte commands and stuff. Okay, package.json. So basically, the commands we need, the really important commands is there's npm run build. That's when you want to build out your final output. Okay, which let's see here. What folder does that build out to? Should be in here somewhere. Outsource input comes main output bundle. Okay, so it's gonna make a build folder. Okay. Don't worry, you don't need to know how to read rollup config commands. I just spent some time making some templates with rollup and webpack last month, so I've gotten used to it. So there's your build command. So let's go back to those commands. That's package lock. This is package JSON. This is for developing, so we're going to be working mainly with this command. Okay, and this is, it kind of builds like a little mini server if you want to serve the output of build. Okay, probably won't use that right now. Okay, cool. So let's do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to run npm run dev. That's going to run that dev command. npm run always runs whatever command we specify. So npm run, we want to run the dev script. Sorry for the sirens, I live in Brooklyn. Oh, and they didn't like that. Let's take a look. npm run dev, no such file directory. It's package.json. Oh, because I'm still in, I didn't actually cd into the project folder. Project 1. So npm run dev. And see, now it's running on port 5000. So now I can go over here and be like localhost 5000 and see our website. See, hello world. What I did do is I imported some basic templating into here. What did I use again? It's been a while. Oh, 1 second. Just waiting for all these sirens. This is what happens when you live in a busy street corner in Brooklyn, always on the way to a hospital. So basically you have lots of ambulances constantly driving by. And if you've listened to my videos, you've probably gotten used to this. So basically here you have your main app.svelte. So let's take a look at how it is. So there's, in this template that I've created, you have a header and footer component just to kind of get you started, which are both in the components folder. So see, each component belongs in a Svelte file. Okay? So see, those links are in the header component, and I have the pure CSS framework built in. That's what it is. Okay, so as you see here, let me just find where I actually included that. I think that's in public. Yeah, there's the index.html. Is that where I included the link? Yeah, right here, pure CSS. So technically you can use the pure CSS classes in this template. Pure CSS. Let's just Google it and make sure I'm going to the right place. And Pure CSS is a nice little framework that has like built-in stuff. Okay, I just kind of built that in there so you have that as a tool out of the gate. Cool. So you have that available to you. So that's why we have these nice styled buttons already in our project. Okay. And notice that, like, this is how you can use a component. I can actually put a component like kind of like an HTML tag. So if you've used like React, Vue, or Angular, this is not a unfamiliar pattern. Now, how am I able to use this when this header component's in this header.svelte file? Okay, the way a Svelte file works out is that it's very much like Vue, where you have 3 parts. You put all your JavaScript in script tags. So see here, my JavaScript, I import header and footer. And then you put all your HTML in some sort of HTML tag. Doesn't have to be a main tag, could be anything. Just you have to have one parent, and you make your HTML. And then you can put all your CSS in a style tag on that same thing, and it'll compile this whole thing for you. So for example, right now, that H1 is the color black. I can go here in the style tag and just do some CSS and be like H1, the color of H1s will be red. Okay, and then when I come back, see, the H1 is red. So I can do styling from any component. That's pretty cool. Okay. And I'm pretty sure that when it compiles it, it scopes it so that way this H1 style, this styling will only apply to this here. Okay, so that's neat. I'll get rid of that for now. Okay, so notice here we have this variable called name. Now I declare name here, but name doesn't have a value. Okay, so where is that coming from? Well, I have it coming from here. Because see, this main.js file, this is what injects the app component into your DOM. Okay, so you really never need to change this, but the idea is if you wanted to pass some initial props to that app component, you could do it from here. Okay, but in order for any component to accept props, and again, props are variables being passed from somewhere else, you have to export the variable. Okay, you always have to export any variable you want to use as props. So in that case, since this is rendering the app components in this function here, we can pass some initial props to that component. And since I named a prop named name, and my app component's looking for a prop named name, it finds it, that receives that value hello world, which shows up here. But I don't have to just have variables come from outside. I can declare variables inside. So let's do let count equals 0. Okay, and here, like when you use React, you have to specify certain variables as like reactive. The way you do that is you create something called state. In React, you declare certain variables as reactive. You put them in a thing called data. Okay. In Svelte, if the variable is reassignable, meaning you declared it with a let, it's assumed it's reactive. Okay, so whenever you reassign the value, it will update. So in this case, you generally want to keep everything as a single value, so numbers, booleans, because when you change the properties of an object or you change the elements of an array, it's not necessarily a reassignment because of the whole differences between values and references in JavaScript. If you don't understand that, the easiest way to just avoid that is just make sure all your variables are either like a number, a boolean, or a string. I wouldn't put the things you want to be reactive necessarily in objects or arrays unless you really understand like the whole values and references thing, so you know how to create a new assignment. Okay, because again, a new assignment must occur to trigger a re-rendering of the component. Cool. And I probably will go over that in a future video, but just figured I'd mention that now. So let's show that. So I'm going to just delete this. And what we're going to do is we're going to say h1, and we're going to show, you can always use curly brackets to interpolate JavaScript expressions into your HTML template. So I'm going to just put in my expression is just a variable count, but it doesn't have to be a variable. So I could put like h2 and put like just a mathematical expression, 2 plus 2. And we'll see here, there's count, and then there's the 2 plus 2, 4. Okay, so I'll just remove that now that we've made that point. So what we want to do is make this count up. So what we'll do is we'll make a function. So we'll do, and the cool thing is that you just do normal JavaScript. So I just write a normal arrow function. Const add1 equals, just do it. Oh, need an arrow. Okay. Count plus equals 1. Okay, so I'm reassigning the variable, and when the variable updates, it'll update the screen. Okay, so now I just need to attach this function to this h1. So that way, well, actually, I'm going to make a button. Button, click me. So if I want to add a event, so I want to say this function, I want this function to run on this button. What I'm going to do is just say on. On means I'm going to listen for an event, colon, then the event. I want to listen for click. So on click equals curly brackets add1. So now whenever I click this button, it's going to run this add1 function. The add1 function adds 1 to count. So when that happens, this is going to update because it's a reassignment of this variable. See? That's actually quite simple compared to how you'd have to do it in other functions. I don't have to like put the count in the data object and then put the add one in a methods object, or in React I didn't have to, you know, create a piece of state and then use a set state function. No, just plain old JavaScript reassign the variable and it just updates. Very cool. Okay, so again, Svelte just makes a lot of these basic things pretty easy. Okay, let's say we wanted to work with a form. Okay, so I'm going to put below my button, we'll put an input tag. Input type equals text. Okay, so there's the input. So we have this input here. Okay, and what I want to probably do is I want to separate that out. I want that to, so I'll put an HR, meaning it's just a horizontal line, just to separate that out. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to create a variable called input. So that const let input, the variable has to be reassignable. So let input equal an empty string. Okay, or actually just write type in the form field. That'll be the starting value of that variable. And what I'm going to do is that we can just bind it. So if you've used Vue or Angular, this is going to be very familiar. In React, you'd have to do like this whole machination where you create like a handle change function and then bind the value on top of that. And but here I can just do bind. I don't have to do vbind or ngbind, just the word bind. Because again, this gets compiled, so it doesn't have to worry about conflicting with like other properties and other frameworks. It just does. So bind, and the name of the variable I'm binding. So what this means is I'm binding this property, I am binding the value property to a variable that I have in the JavaScript. So, and the variable that I'm connecting it to, and you always use curly brackets, that's kind of different from Vue. Vue, you always use like strings. Same thing I think with Angular. So I'm saying, no, not add one. Input. So it binds the value with input. So basically the form, so if I look at here, see it starts out with type in the form field because that's the value of the variable and that's bound to the input. Now just to make it even cooler, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an h1 here. And inside that h1 will show the value of input. So see type in the form field. So now if I delete this, see it updates as I do things. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Like that's a pretty easy way to use forms. Okay, so now if I want to do something with that data, I can just create a submit button. So let's do that. Input. Actually, I'll just use a button. Okay, click me. And then we'll create a function for that button. So let's say const submit, const handle submit equals, or we'll just call it use form equals, and what's this going to do? It's just going to alert input. Okay, so every time we click that button, so now we're going to add the event on the button. So on click equals, again, curly brackets to pass the function, and that's going to be use form, and watch what happens. I'm going to type, so right now if I click on it, type in the form field. Okay, cheese. So that makes it really easy to just use the data from the form, get the data from the form. That was really quick. So like really quick, we've made a counter, we've set up a form. I mean, this is all within 20 minutes. Not bad at all. Okay, and we saw how to pass props. So let me just actually use the header component just to show you another example. So let's say in this component, header.svelte, and notice then in the component, I don't have to do any kind of exports. That's another nice thing about Svelte. I don't have to export anything here. You just import the file. So I import the component from this file and the compiler knows what to do. I don't have to do all this extra typing. Very nice. So then I'm going to go here. We're going to call this let So again, to create a prop in the component that's receiving the prop, we have to export a variable. So export let my prop. Okay, and then we're going to use my prop here. My prop. Okay, and then we're going to go to the component. So we're using the header component here. So I can now pass it a prop called my prop. So my prop equals, and then I can equal it whatever I want. So we're going to just say make it equal the number 10. Why not? Okay, so that's how props works in this. So I can't receive a prop unless I define it ahead of time. So that's one little rule. You have to define your props ahead of time. But yeah, now if I go over here, take a look at there, see like now that button has a number 10 on it because it's receiving the information from that prop. Okay, now if we want to make it even fancier, let's do this. Let's go back to app. Okay, and let's say my prop is always going to equal input. Okay, so now when I type in the form field, so see like the button starts out with type in the form field, and see now it's changing the button because it's repassing the prop every time I update the input. Hello, that is cool. Okay, so you can bind things in all sorts of different fun ways. There's lifecycle functions. There's all sorts of other fun stuff that we will go into in future videos, but I think this is a good introduction to Svelte. My name is Alex Merced. Join the Slack channel. Join the Discord channel over there at devnursery.com. Have a great day and enjoy.